You're not lazy. That's the thing nobody says. You're actually one of the more self-aware people in the room. You think about your life more than most people do. You analyze your decisions. You know your patterns. You've read enough to understand what's holding you back. And yet, here you are, again, in the same place, with the same distance between where you are and where you believed you'd be by now. And the strangest part? You have a reason for every single gap. Not excuses, reasons, good ones. Ones that hold up under scrutiny. Ones that other people nod along to when you explain them. The timing was off. The resources weren't there. The situation was more complicated than it looked from the outside. And every reason is at least partially true. That's what makes this so dangerous. Because the lie that destroys people is never pure fiction. It always has truth in it. Enough truth to sound right, enough truth to feel right, enough truth to make you defend it when someone questions it. You have been building a very intelligent, very detailed, very convincing case for why your life is exactly the size it currently is, and you don't even know you're doing it. So here is the question that should sit uncomfortably in your chest right now. What if your reasons are real and they're still destroying you? There is something living in your mind that you have never been introduced to. It has no name in daily life. Nobody taught you about it in school. Nobody warned you it was being built inside you, but it has been there for years. It is the excuse machine, and it is not a sign of weakness. That is the first thing you need to understand. Weak people don't build good excuses. They don't need to. They've already given up. They don't care enough to construct a defense. You care. That's why your excuses are so good. The excuse machine is built by intelligence, by self-awareness, by years of genuine effort that produced painful results. Every time you tried something and it didn't work, your mind filed the experience. Every time someone doubted you and turned out to be right, your mind filed that too. Every time the circumstances were genuinely unfair. Every time the timing was actually bad. Every time the obstacle was real, your mind took notes. And slowly over years, it built a system designed to protect you from pain. It works like this. When an opportunity appears, the system runs a scan. It checks for risk. It checks for past failures in similar situations. It checks for variables that are outside your control. And then it generates output. A reason, a logical, well-constructed, hard-to-argue-with reason why this is not the right moment. Why you need more preparation. Why the conditions aren't quite right yet. The output feels like wisdom. It is not wisdom, it is armor. Old armor, built for battles that are already over. The armor was useful once. When you were younger and less equipped, and the world was less legible to you, the caution was appropriate. The protection made sense. But armor built for yesterday's battles does not stop protecting you when yesterday ends. It stays on. It gets heavier. It starts slowing you down in situations where you no longer need to be protected. And here is the part that will make you uncomfortable. The smarter you are, the better the armor fits. The more self-aware you are, the more convincing the output becomes. Because the excuse machine doesn't produce lazy thinking. It produces your best thinking. Applied to the wrong problem, you are using your most powerful mental resources to build the case for staying still. And the case is so good that you cannot see it for what it is, because it doesn't feel like an excuse. It feels like your actual, legitimate, considered assessment of the situation, which is exactly why it is so hard to escape, and exactly why so many brilliant, capable, genuinely motivated people spend years standing at the edge of their potential without stepping over. Not because they lack courage, not because they lack ability, because they have built, with great care and great intelligence, a reason not to. Let's go inside the moment. The real one, not the highlight reel version. The 2am version. You're lying there, not sleeping, not quite. That specific kind of awake where your mind won't stop but won't go anywhere useful either. And you're doing the thing you always do in that state. You're reviewing the project you didn't start, the conversation you avoided, the decision you keep circling without landing on, the version of yourself that you keep promising is coming soon. And your mind does something automatic in that review. Something you've probably never noticed it doing. It defends you, to you. It runs through the reasons, quietly, not dramatically, just laying them out like evidence on a table. The economy, the timing, the people who didn't come through, the resources that weren't available, the circumstances that made the outcome almost impossible from the start. And as the reasons pile up, something settles in your chest. Not peace, not quite, but something that feels adjacent to peace. The feeling of a case that has been made, a verdict that has been reached. You didn't fail. You were failed by the circumstances. You didn't stop. You were stopped. And for a few minutes, that feeling holds. Then something else comes. Quieter, underneath. The feeling that you just lied to yourself, not with false information, with selectively arranged true information. You know that feeling. You've felt it before. That small, specific discomfort that arrives when the excuse has been accepted, but the part of you that actually knows you refuses to co-sign it, you push it down. The reasons are real. You know they are. So you accept the verdict and eventually you sleep. And in the morning you start again, with the same logic, the same protection, the same carefully constructed case for why today is also not quite the right moment. This is the cycle, and you have been inside it long enough that it no longer feels like a cycle. It feels like your life. The hope comes in the form of a new idea, a new plan, a new version of the goal that feels more achievable than the last one, and the hope is real. It is genuinely real every single time. You are not faking the belief, you mean it. Then the machine activates, not loudly, not immediately. It waits until the cost becomes real, until action is required that has actual stakes, and then it delivers its output. The reason, the logical, well-supported, hard-to-argue with reason, and you listen, because the reason is good, and because the reason is partially true, and because agreeing with it is less painful than disagreeing with it. And the cycle moves to the next rotation. What makes this specific loop so hard to break is not the excuses themselves, it's the emotional function they serve. Every excuse is a pain management tool, not a conscious one. Your mind is not cynically manufacturing reasons to keep you comfortable. It genuinely believes the reasons it produces. It has convinced itself completely. Because the alternative sitting with the raw possibility that you could move and are choosing not to is a level of discomfort that the system is designed to prevent, the excuse makes the staying feel like wisdom. And wisdom feels better than cowardice. So the mind produces wisdom, and you produce exactly zero forward motion. And the gap between where you are and where you could be grows by one more day, quietly. Without drama, without anyone noticing, including you. Here is what the world has handed you as solutions. Let's be honest about them. First, accountability. Get an accountability partner. Tell someone your goals. Check in weekly. Create external pressure to replace the internal pressure you can't generate alone. And it works. For a while. Until the accountability becomes its own performance. Until you learn to satisfy the check-in without actually moving. Until the reporting replaces the results. Until you are accountable to the structure and still not to yourself. Because accountability targets the behavior. The excuse machine is not a behavior. It is a belief system. And a belief system laughs at behavioral systems. It uses them. It satisfies them on the surface. And it continues running underneath. Second, motivation. Find your why. Connect to your purpose. Get emotional about the goal. Watch the speeches. Read the stories. Feel the fire. And the fire is real for hours, sometimes days. Then it cools because motivation is a feeling, and feelings are produced by biology. Biology has other priorities. Biology gets tired. Biology gets hungry. Biology wakes up at 6 a.m. after 4 hours of sleep and does not care about your vision board. The excuse machine is patient. It waits for the motivation to thin, and then it moves. Third, planning. Get strategic. Build the system. Remove friction. Optimize the environment. Design the conditions for success so that success becomes the path of least resistance. And the planning feels like progress, because the planning requires thought, real thought, detailed thought, the kind of thought that produces a document with sections and timelines and metrics, and the document sits in a folder. Because the excuse machine loves planning. Planning is its favorite food. It will let you plan indefinitely. It will even help you plan better, because planning is not threatening. Planning is preparation. And preparation can always be extended. You always need a little more preparation. That's the output, every time. Fourth, mindset work. Identify the limiting belief. Challenge it. Replace it with an empowering belief. Reprogram the subconscious. Release what no longer serves you. And the work is real. The mechanism is real. Hill himself documented the power of the deep mind. But the version being sold is shallow. It treats the excuse machine like a software bug, a line of bad code that can be identified and deleted. Replace the negative thought with a positive one. But the machine is not a bug. It is a feature, built over years, embedded in the operating system. It will not be deleted by a morning affirmation. Every solution that has been handed to you targeted a symptom. None of them address the root. And the root is this: you have not yet decided that your life is more important than your comfort. Not as a concept, not as a value you hold in theory. As an actual, operational, daily, costly decision that gets made again every single time the machine produces its output. And until that decision is made at that level, every system, every tool, every strategy will be eventually overridden. The machine is smarter than the system. Every time. Napoleon Hill sat across from a man who had failed to launch the same business for 11 years. Not the same business in spirit. Literally the same business, same concept, same market, same plan. Rebuilt and restarted 11 times over 11 years, and every time it collapsed, the man had a reason. A good one. Verifiable. Documented. The kind that would hold up in conversation with anyone who heard it. Hill did not argue with the reasons. He asked one question. He said, "What would you have done if none of those reasons existed?" The man was quiet for a long time. Then he described, with perfect clarity and without hesitation, exactly what he would have done, the specific first step, the exact conversation he would have had, the decision he would have made on day one in the absence of the obstacle. Hill looked at him and said something that the man later described as the most disturbing thing he had ever heard. He said, "The path was always clear. You just needed the obstacle more than you needed the destination." That sentence is going to land differently for different people. For some of you, it will produce defensiveness. Good. Defensiveness is the machine activating. Notice it. For some of you, it will produce something quieter, a recognition, the specific feeling of a thing you have always known being said out loud for the first time. Here is what Hill understood that no one had told this man. The excuse is not the obstacle. The excuse is the preference. On some level. Not conscious. Not chosen with full awareness, but real. You have been preferring the reason to the result, because the result requires a version of you that does not yet exist. And becoming that version is more threatening to your current identity than staying where you are. The excuse is not laziness. It is self-preservation. The current you is comfortable with the current life, even when the current life is painful, even when the current you is dissatisfied, because the pain is familiar. And the identity knows how to survive familiar pain. The unfamiliar, the version of you on the other side of the decision, that version is unknown, and the mind does not trust unknown. The mind will choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar possibility every single time it is not actively overridden. This is the shift. Not that your reasons are fake. They may be completely real, but that you have been using real reasons to make a false case. The case that the circumstances are the obstacle, when the obstacle is the relationship between you and the circumstances, not the circumstances themselves. And the relationship can change, starting with one decision, not the decision to fix everything, not the decision to become a new person overnight, the decision to move once right now, today, without waiting for the reason to disappear first. Drop a comment. Tell me, what is the one move you have the clearest excuse for not making? The one with the best reason. The one that sounds most justified. That one. The first principle Hill returned to across everything he wrote was this. He called it the master of decision. Not the habit of decision, not the practice of decision, the mastery of it. Most people treat decisions like events. Something happens that requires a choice. They gather information, they weigh options, they consult their feelings, they wait for clarity. And then, when the conditions feel adequate, they decide. This process sounds reasonable. It is precisely what the excuse machine was designed to exploit, because the machine lives in the gap. The space between the trigger and the decision. Every second that space stays open is a second the machine can work in. It generates considerations, valid ones. It raises questions, good ones. It identifies risks, real ones. And the longer the gap stays open, the better the machine's output becomes. Hill's highest achievers had collapsed the gap, not through impulsiveness, through a different relationship to certainty. They had accepted at the deepest level that certainty is not a precondition for decision. Certainty is a reward for decision. It comes after, never before. The person waiting for certainty before they move will wait for a thing that does not exist in the sequence they believe it does. What this feels like when you apply it is deeply uncomfortable at first. You make a decision before you feel ready. The machine immediately produces output, all the reasons the decision was premature, all the ways it could go wrong, all the information you still don't have. You feel it, fully, and you move anyway. Not because the reasons disappeared, because you decided the reasons don't get a vote on this one. That first decision made consciously, with full awareness of the machine's output, without waiting for the output to stop, is the most important decision you will ever make. Not because of what it produces externally, because of what it proves internally. It proves to the deepest part of your operating system that the machine can be overridden, and that proof changes the architecture. Not all at once, gradually. The next override is slightly less costly. The one after that, slightly less again. The machine does not disappear, but it loses authority. And authority is the only thing it ever actually had. The second principle Hill described in careful detail is what he called accurate self-analysis. Not self-improvement, not self-criticism, accurate self-analysis. The distinction matters enormously. Most people who are stuck oscillate between two positions. Either they defend themselves completely, the circumstances were impossible, anyone would have done the same, the failure was not their fault. Or they attack themselves completely, they are the problem, they are broken, they lack some fundamental quality that success requires. Both positions are inaccurate. Both are emotionally motivated. Both protect the person from the one thing that would actually help them, the truth. Accurate self-analysis looks like this. You sit with a specific failure, not a category of failures, one specific moment, and you ask two questions with equal rigor. What was genuinely outside my control here? And what was not? Not to distribute blame, to identify leverage. Because the things outside your control are not your material. They cannot be worked with. But the things inside your control, even small, even partial, those are the only things that can be changed. And you cannot change what you have not accurately located. Most people who do this exercise are surprised by the second list, not because it is long, because it is specific. Because it contains things they have been filing under the first list for years. Things they labeled as circumstances that were actually choices. Things they labeled as obstacles that were actually decisions made by default. The machine files everything it can into the external column. That is its job. Accurate self-analysis is the practice of auditing the filing. What this feels like in real life is a mixture of discomfort and relief. The discomfort comes from accountability. The relief comes from agency. Because every item you move from the external column to the internal column is an item you can now work with. It is no longer something that happened to you. It is something you have influence over. And influence, even partial, is power. The machine hates this exercise. It will produce many reasons not to do it. Those reasons are the first test of everything described in the first principle. The third principle is the one Hill was most careful about. He called it the use of organized planning versus the use of activity as escape. He had observed something precise across hundreds of people who claimed to be working toward their goals but were not moving. They were busy, genuinely, exhaustingly busy. The days were full. The effort was real. The hours were long. But the activity was not organized around the destination. It was organized around the avoidance of the specific action that the destination required. The one action with real stakes. The one that could fail publicly. The one where the outcome was not certain and the cost of attempting it was real. Everything else, the research, the preparation, the networking, the learning, the optimizing, the planning, the refining, all of it was legitimate work. And all of it was the machine's most sophisticated operation, keeping you productive enough that you cannot be accused of laziness, including by yourself. Hill called the critical action the one thing that, if done, makes the most difference. Not the most comfortable thing, not the most preparatory thing. The thing that avoided means nothing else matters. And he observed that virtually everyone knew, without being told, what their one thing was. They did not need help identifying it. They needed help admitting they were avoiding it. Because the one thing is always the thing with the best excuse attached to it. Always. The mental shift is this. At the start of each day, before the activity begins, ask this question. What is the one action I have the best reason not to take today? And then take it first, before anything else. Before the easier work creates the feeling of productivity that makes the hard work feel less necessary. Not because it will be easy. It will not be easy. The machine will be loudest in that moment. That is how you know it is the right move. The fourth principle is the one that requires the most from you over the longest period. Hill called it persistence with purpose. And before you stop reading because you've heard about persistence 100 times, this is different. What Hill documented was not persistence as grinding. Not persistence as suffering through difficulty with your jaw set. What he documented was a specific quality that separated the people who broke through from the people who stopped just before the breakthrough. He called it purpose memory. The ability to hold the reason for the work clearly in mind at the exact moment when the work is most costly. Not the goal, the reason beneath the goal. The actual human reason. The version of your life on the other side of the decision. The specific feeling that you are moving toward. Most people have the reason clearly in mind at the beginning. When the hope is fresh and the energy is high and the cost is theoretical, they lose it at the precise moment it matters most. When the cost is real, when the result is delayed, when the machine is loudest, and in the absence of purpose memory, the machine's output fills the space. The reasons, the logic, the very convincing case for stopping now and trying again under better conditions. Purpose memory is not a feeling you generate. It is a practice. A specific, daily, deliberate practice of returning to the actual reason. Not the stated reason, the felt reason, the one that lives below the language. The one that is connected to something in your life that actually matters to you at the level of who you are, not just what you want. When you can access that reason at the moment of maximum resistance, the machine's output does not disappear, but it becomes less loud than the purpose. And less loud is enough. The fifth principle is the one Hill described as the root beneath all the others. He called it the definiteness of decision about identity, not the goal. The identity. Here is the difference. A goal is something you are trying to reach. An identity is something you have decided you are. And the decision about identity does not wait for the evidence. It precedes it. The person who has made a definite decision about identity does not ask the machine's permission to move, because the machine's output is relevant to someone who is trying. It is irrelevant to someone who simply is. You do not ask the machine whether you should breathe. You breathe because you are a person who breathes. The decision was made before the question could arise. The definiteness of identity works the same way. When it is complete, when it has been made at the level below conscious thought, the machine's output arrives and is processed as information rather than instruction. The reason is heard. The risk is noted. The concern is registered, and then the identity moves anyway. Because that is what this identity does, not because it is brave, not because it has conquered fear, but because moving is simply what it is. This shift does not happen through affirmations. It does not happen through repetition of positive statements. It happens through the accumulated experience of overriding the machine, decision by decision, day by day. Each override a small deposit into the identity account. Each deposit changing incrementally, and then suddenly, what the deep mind accepts as true about who you are. There is no shortcut to this. Hill was clear about that. The identity is built through the work, not before it. But here is what changes the moment you understand the mechanism. You stop waiting to feel like someone who moves without excuses. You become someone who moves without excuses by moving without excuses. Once, then again, then again. Until the identity the machine was protecting against is the identity looking back at you from the mirror. Here is what happens after you see all of this clearly. You will feel it shift something. Right now, in this moment, something will feel different. The logic will land. The mechanism will make sense. You will see your own history inside it, clearly. And then tomorrow morning will come, and the machine will be there, patient, familiar, already generating output for the first decision of the day, and it will feel exactly like it always has. Like wisdom, like reason, like the appropriate, intelligent, considered response to real circumstances. And you will want to agree with it. Not because you forgot this, you will remember this. But remembering a thing and overriding a system are not the same operation. The system does not care what you know, it cares what you do. You will feel the pull toward the comfortable version. The version where you understand this as a concept and file it alongside everything else you understand. You will feel the pull toward more preparation, more thinking. One more piece of information before you actually move. That pull is the machine wearing new clothes. It has done this before. Every time you encountered an idea that threatened it, it let the idea in. It acknowledged the idea. It even agreed with the idea in principle. And then it quietly metabolized the idea into content. Something you know rather than something you do. Something that confirms your self-awareness without requiring your self-change. You are more self-aware than almost everyone around you. That is true. It is also the machine's greatest asset, because self-awareness without action is just a more sophisticated form of staying still. The war is not between your knowledge and your ignorance. It is between your identity and your comfort. And comfort has been winning, not because you chose it consciously, because you chose it by default. Every time you accepted the machine's output without overriding it. Every time the reason was good enough to stop the move. Every default choice was a vote. And the votes have accumulated into the life you are currently living. That life is not your ceiling. It is the record of your defaults to date. The record changes the moment the defaults change. Not all of them. One. One default changed once, today. Without waiting for the machine to stop. Without waiting for the reason to disappear. Without waiting to feel ready. The machine will tell you this is not the right moment. It is. It is exactly the right moment. It has always been exactly the right moment. You came here for a framework, a system, a better way to manage the excuses. What you found is simpler than that, and harder than that. The excuse is not your enemy. You are not your enemy. The gap between where you are and where you are going is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of a decision that has not yet been made, completely. Not the decision about the goal. Not the decision about the strategy. The decision about who you are. Made fully. Without escape routes. Without the silent reservation that says, I'll try this, and if it doesn't work, the reason was real after all. That reservation is the machine's last line of defense. The moment it is removed, the moment the decision is made without it, the machine does not disappear. But it changes jobs. It stops being the voice that stops you. It becomes the voice that prepares you. The intelligence that was always there, redirected at last toward the actual problem. You have always had what this required. Not the circumstances, not the conditions. Not the perfect timing or the complete information or the guaranteed outcome. The capacity to decide. That capacity is present right now. The machine will have a reason why now is not the moment. You already know what to do. With that reason, if you're done letting good reasons build a small life, say it in the comments. One word is enough. And if this is what your mind has been waiting to hear, you already know what to do.